Utah Senator Mike Lee reportedly playing a critical behind-the-scenes role to get President Trump acquitted in his upcoming impeachment trial. Politico is describing the Republican as a quiet force in this effort and says that he's emerged as a de facto leader in the case. One America's John Hines sat down with Lee and has more from Capitol Hill.
In the setting of the Senate, how does someone go about defending the president? I mean, what sort of strategy would they have, or what sort of potentially arguments might they use or might they employ, if you can attempt to look in your crystal ball a little bit based on your experience?
In this case, there's a target-rich environment for figuring out where to defend the president. There's a target-rich environment because the proceedings in front of the House have been unfair as a procedural matter. They've been deficient as a legal matter. They've been uncompelling as a moral matter. There's nothing in the record that they've compiled, no evidence that I've seen so far, that indicates anything even remotely impeachable, not even remotely criminal, not even wrong. I mean, look, President Trump, from what I've seen, simply succeeded where President Obama had tried and failed for years to convince Ukraine to investigate allegations of corruption within Burisma. That's not a problem. And it's certainly not a basis for undoing a presidential election.
Is it potentially possible that some of your Democratic colleagues could end up opposing impeachment of the president, do you think?
I would like to think so, because I don't see this as something that has to be or should be a partisan issue. I would like to believe that I would have the same reaction if we were dealing with the president of the opposite political party and I saw such a flimsy case come forward. I can't imagine that I would be supportive of this. It's not right. It's not fair. You've got to give the accused an adequate opportunity to defend him or herself. And ultimately, when you're dealing with the removal of the President of the United States, you've got to have a good reason to do it. They don't have that here.
Well, when do you anticipate that we will have some sort of a little more of a framework, no more details about the date this all might begin, about whether or not witnesses may be called? Where are things now in that process? It seems that things are kind of fluid right now.
The House articles of impeachment, once they're received by the Senate, summons will be issued notifying the Chief Justice that he needs to be here by 12:30 the next day. At that point, the Chief Justice and 100 senators will be sworn in to handle the next phase of the impeachment process, the Senate proceedings, or the trial as it's often described. And from that moment forward, any resolution that's adopted to decide issues regarding scheduling, regarding the calling of witnesses, once we're sworn in, any motion like that can pass with a simple majority vote. And I think that would likely be the next thing to pass after we're sworn in. The Senate impeachment rules require us to meet starting at 1 p.m. every day except for Sunday, unless or until we agree otherwise for those proceedings. But we may, by a simple majority vote, suspend those rules and go to an alternative calendar that we adopt with that simple majority vote.
So potentially there could be a recess at some point?
Potentially, yes. I do think there's a lot of desire on the part of members of the Senate, I would think in both political parties within the Senate, to move through this expeditiously to make sure that we're doing our job. So I don't anticipate that we'll necessarily be breaking for a long period of time, but there might be some deviation from the default rule.
I know there's been some talk. Senator Schumer has said that he would like to call witnesses. The president would like to call witnesses. I'm getting the sense, though, that from some of your colleagues, they'd prefer to keep it abbreviated, and they feel like more witnesses might drag things out a bit.
I personally regard this question as unknown and unknowable right now, because until we receive the articles and then we've heard argument, the opening argument for the prosecution and for the defense, it's hard for us to know where the points of contact will be, where any ambiguities will be. It may well be that the arguments that they raise, based on the record gathered on the House side, might be sufficient for most senators to feel like they can make a decision on the case. It may be that it's not adequate. It's really difficult to know, almost impossible to predict at this stage, whether that will be true. Either way, the decision on whether or to what extent live witnesses may be called on the Senate floor in the Senate trial proceedings will be made primarily by the President's defense counsel and will be made in response to the opening arguments.
Senator Mike Lee, good to talk to you. Thank you for talking to One American News. It's a pleasure at this historical time in the U.S. Senate.
Thank you.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.